All right, and we are live with another Beyond the Escape. It's been a little bit of a hiatus, but we have a new project in the works. We're working on a creature compendium, and so basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on this live. In fact, we might even forget that we are doing a broadcast, and we might just be talking about monsters and hunting and things like that. But I'm Michael Blodgett, and
I'm Dane Collins. You can find my work under Dane Clark Collins.
All right. So let's start this out. We had to figure out sort of how we want to lay this book out. We talked about doing it less like a gaming book and more like a fictional book, but obviously we're going to keep the stats. Did you have any big ideas on sort of presentation?
Yeah, so I had a few ideas for some the ideas themselves are irrelevant, but they were ideas that had us kind of they involve us having a back and forth of some sort. And so to that end, what I was thinking could be interesting is we open the book with an intro in character. So we do have to explain for people who don't know. The idea here is the two of us take on the role of two different characters, so that with each creature, or at least with a lot of the creatures, we get a couple of different perspectives, perhaps. And so to that end, I was thinking we could start it where that's our characters explaining that we're gonna, that they write this intro before they do the book. And the reason I was thinking this is, and this is just an idea I'm throwing out, but they talk about how they're going to bring their own perspectives to the entries. That's kind of the point. So that way, having a little dialogue along the way makes sense. It's almost like the two of us going back and forth on a Google Doc in comments in some case. I wouldn't want to go too far with it, but here and there, if we have a little joke that involves some back and forth or something like that, then it makes sense for us to do that. But it also, I was thinking, and this is the part that I'm testing the waters here, see what you think, is maybe, again, without all of this has to be light. The focus is the monsters, but there could be a little bit of a story that unfolds between the characters as we go, as we're writing the book. As it continues, they start to learn little things about each other. So as an example, and this is where the whole idea started, except this idea is so absurd, it's not the thing, but just to give you an idea of the sort of thing I was thinking. This character that I came up with has some let's say neuroses that are going to come out in this. So I was thinking he's constantly, and I should have backed up a little bit and explained this, that the character that I was thinking tends to try to look at things from the monster's perspectives. He's a little bit of an apologist even. May even go further than that. But what I was thinking is there could be a little joke in here where, you explain that this creature has such and such horrific physical condition. And then my character says, yeah, that's a lot like my elongated head, which is ridiculous. That's nothing. It's not the same, but it shows that I have this issue, as if they're equivalent. But then as it goes, my character starts saying, yeah, that's a lot like my webbed toes. And then, yeah, that's a lot like my spine. And to where you start thinking, holy crap, this guy actually is a monster. Now that's ridiculous, and I'm not saying that, but my brain was going to these absurd extremes in order to just try to think of something interesting. And so if we scale that idea back and just have this concept where something unfolds as it goes, and I don't know what that is, but I'm just throwing it out there. I did make a note, tone that down. But but something where we sort of just in our little interaction, you know, there could be a little bit of a story as we go.
All right, yeah, definitely. So I've started working on some of these creatures, and you know, right now a lot of it's just making sure all the stats are right. I added in a new thing that isn't in standard D20, which is a weakness category. And I mean, in normal D&D, creatures have weaknesses. You know, like you'll say damage reduction 5, except for silver weapons and so on. But they've never made like a little category area. And so, like, one of the creatures, and this might be a good one for you to check out first to see. I have envisioned in my head doing, you know, and this is just in the start, so you can see where I'm going. We can go from there. But under the Creature Compendium in Google Docs, there's a couple different folders, just so you know how I'm navigating this. And I hope this isn't boring for people that are listening, but like this is a good way to see how we organize a project too. So SagaBorn Creature Compendium, there's 4 folders in there. There's Aiden's conversions, and that's Aiden who's working on converting the creatures from D20 over to SagaBorn for the base stats. Character gallery, which is just NPCs, which might be another book we might put out soon. Environmental encounters, and those are like oozes and funguses and things that don't move but still are sort of like a monster. I haven't jumped too much into that. And then work in progress, and all those are ones that have been converted to SagaBorn, but we haven't solidified them yet. And then in the main Creature Compendium is a file called Creature Compendium with an asterisk, and that's the one where I'm taking notes, writing down what we need to put in the book, or even if just fiction comes to mind that will be in the book somewhere, putting that in there. So that's going to be like just basically the big note section that we can pull stuff from.
Right.
But then I've got 6 creatures that I've already gotten. Like these have reached the point that if we just wanted to like walk away from them, they're ready to go in a book. So for example, the Ankh, which is a giant lizard type creature, it has all the stats already. And then even though the characters that we're going to be writing this book from the perspective of didn't write anything on this, what we had already written in the past for the elf book, I just attributed as the Journal of Jaren Planeswalker. So there's already a fictional description of these creatures that we could just run with. You know, like if we're like, okay, this creature, like this is all people need to know about it, we can just walk away from this.
Right.
There's another one, the Angrel, which was also in the Elves of Uteria. But I attribute it to from the Bestiary Tome of Sinon. So it's like this fictional book that we can, if we already have entries done and we don't want to add anything, we can just leave it, or we can come in and we can add to it. But if we do that, the one thing that we have to make sure we do is we can talk about personalities. We can even talk about talents. Big thing that's changed with how we're doing the creatures from 3rd edition is 3rd edition gave creatures feats, and that's what they were assigned with as sort of their, like, you know, special abilities. And so what I decided would be really neat is they have recommended feats. So if someone wants to just pull a monster from the book, they can pull it from the book and run with it, and it's there. Or it has like talent points. So for example, on the line it says talents, 3 points are recommended: alertness, blind fight, and favored terrain desert. So you could actually just keep those 3 talents, or you could actually add in your own talents, which would mean that players, when they run into, you know, for this one is the Angrel, if they run into an Angrel, they're like, oh, well, they've always got blind fight. Well, the DM might not have given them blind fight, because now you have the option to change their talents, which makes the combat a little bit more interesting. So that being said, like the basic traits are going to stay about the same. You know, like if it's a slug-like creature that moves at 10 feet speed, we can't get in an argument in the fiction saying, well, it can move really fast, and no, it can move slow. Like we have to stick with the stats, but we can argue about the disposition, how they feel about things, and even bringing up things. That's why I brought up the talents, is because then we could say, oh well, they don't always fight well in the darkness. There's documented cases where they don't fight well in the darkness, and that can be attributed to the fact that they might not have the talent of blind fight.
Right.
And I want to write in, because we want to make this, as cool and as immersive as possible. We can't get rid of things like hit points. And I haven't really wrapped my head around like how to talk about that. Other than I thought that there'd just be a whole section that we would write, because we're going to have to explain what each thing means. Like challenge rating. Angrel has a challenge rating of 2. Like, what does that mean? Like if you're playing the game or if you're trying to be immersive. And so, we're going to have to write a paragraph about it anyways, or a couple sentences. So we can say, that my hunter character, which is his name is Atan. Atan is like, well, I have arbitrarily created this ranking system that I call the challenge rating, and so even though it goes along with what D20's already created, it also it gives a fictional in for having those sorts of stats,
Right.
And I always want to make it more fictional than game oriented, but I also know at this point how important it is to lay down the stats and have rules properly written, not rules as intended, rules as written. If you're familiar with that, I don't know if you are.
No.
It's one of the big things I learned writing the SagaBorn system is, for example, saying an Angrel will roll into a ball to defend itself, but it's better to say an Angrel may roll into a ball, because then it's not saying that it definitely will.
Right.
That's not the best example, but there's other ones that, like, the wording is very important, and so we have to be really clean in the stats, but in the fiction we can play around with that. And for those people who are watching this, Danny's sort of playing catch up on the stuff that's already been happening with the Creature Compendium. So I'm not just like GM explaining it to him. I'm like, just sort of like catching him up with what we're doing. But does all that make sense so far?
Yeah, the GM splaining makes sense.
Down, I think that's SagaBorn should trademark that. That's when you have to explain something to your characters and no one at the table is listening and they all die anyways.
Right.
So I guess back, because we've been sort of working on and specifically not talking about this, so we can talk about it on here, is the characters. I think we're going to have compendium. So I mentioned my guy's name is Atan, Etahn. Belbane is his name, and I'm thinking he's probably going to be around 45, human, 45, and that's sort of what I'm shooting for, because I think that's about the time that maybe you're not so gung-ho to go out and killing monsters, and you might like say, hey, you know what, I'm going to spend some time at my bar, write some things about this, and help the other hunters, help them learn what I've learned. And I thought that he would be mainly a ranger, just because it makes sense for tracking and stuff like that. But I'm also thinking that he has a flair for being a bard, and so a flair for storytelling. So he's gonna be like maybe one level in bard. That's probably just because as a character portrait, I drew our friend Steve Pack, who is very talented as a storyteller. So now I can't get it out of my head that Atan would be part bard and just like, pull up a chair, pull up an ale, and start just telling everyone about these creatures that he's hunted. Do you have anything you've thought of with your character yet?
Yeah. Delgan, I'm not I'm getting some things now on your.
Okay.
There we go. So I mentioned a few things about him, but I'm not. He has to go on adventures, but I'm sort of imagining him as this cynical philosopher, sort of, he wants to catalog monsters from a academic perspective. Now he has a little bit of a, so if he let's say that your character and my character went out into the field, mine would be writing and being basically useless other than recording, and you'd have to keep him alive. But very useful in that sense. His I had a little bit of a backstory that and you're gonna have to let me know. You know how sometimes my mind goes off in weird places. So let me know if I'm being a little too ridiculous here, but I kind of like it, and I don't think it'll take away from the. I think it'll work. I think it's good. But as a child, his earliest memory is that he got lost in the woods, and a creature came and carried him back to its nest. Now, to anybody who hears this story, clearly it was going to eat him or feed him to its young. But in this child's mind, it was protecting him. It was treating him like one of its own. So he's come to think of himself as like one of them. He feels like he relates to them more than he relates to people. He's always felt like a little bit of an outcast with people, but he feels like he understands. He has a naive feeling that he understands the creatures. Now, in the nest, people come along and save him, and they kill the creature and its young. In his mind, they were the monsters in this scenario, and so ever since then, he's wanted to tell their story. So I'm almost imagining like you would be, and I don't want to put words in your mouth or your character's mouth, but you would be sort of the realist. You've been out there adventuring. You know the dangers. You know that people need to be protected. But I see my characters always being something. I'm somewhat realistic, but a bit of an advocate for them and trying to see things from their perspective. And I even imagined, I don't know if we'll include it or not. It could be just off camera, so to speak. But this conversation where we, I tell this story and you say, yeah, that thing and its brood were going to eat you. And I say, well, agree to disagree. And you say, no, they were going to eat you. And that's the end of the entry, maybe for that monster. But I think I like the idea of any humor aside. I like the idea because, it's not often in these books that the creatures get a voice. And even if it's not their voice, it's a voice. And it's somebody making an effort to do this. Now, I made a little note here about the contrast because I'm envisioning these little minor interactions between us as we discuss these creatures. But if we talk about levity, I want to make sure that it's in doses, because I do think at the same time, and I say this to reassure you as I explain this story, my backstory, that I think these creatures, a lot of them need to be horrific. This is a book of monsters, and we don't want it to turn into goofiness, I think. and I would imagine you'd agree. But I like that contrast where you have potentially some levity with the characters, but we have to get serious to talk about some of these creatures because, you know, it's going to get, I think, knowing us, super dark at points.
Also has to be things like, you know, with the angle, like, you know, it says like that they dislike other people, that they're cowardly creatures, you know, and they seemingly hate all other races of Euteria. So all that sounds like a little too much, you know. So it'd be good to hear the other side because, for example, when Aiden converted the Angrel from Pathfinder, Angrel is our creature. We actually invented them. They're sort of like a armadillo, a bipedal armadillo creature. When he converted him, he's like, actually, I want to have an Angrel as a player class, which I think would be a lot of fun. But like, then they can't just be like a monster of the week, let's kill them all sort of monster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it'll be good to have those little side things. You know, like even if it's like, you could even do the thing. So this entry is from the Bestiary tome. You know, what if there's another tome entry that sort of talks about how they don't hate all other races, but other races have always hunted them, and so on. So that way, if a person's reading through the book, even if it's not your character and my character talking about this creature, the two entries are showing the sort of dualistic view that not everything is black and white, not everything's monster.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I really want it to not just be that while I'm converting our current adventure path over to SagaBorn, I'm trying to make sure that there's not just the one layer path over to like just wipe everything out along the way, and there's no no peaceful way to resolve this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like the idea of us, if we're gonna have a couple of authors and we're gonna be demonstrating perspectives, I do really like the idea of us occasionally really disagreeing. We do have to find a balance because obviously this is a book for gaming. You know, I think we indulge ourselves a little bit with the narrative, and that's I think why we do what we do. So, and I think readers will appreciate it. But on the other hand, when it comes time, they want to sit and crunch numbers and figure it out. We're not confusing them with the perspectives. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I think we can have it both ways. I think we can argue about some of these details, and it adds depth to the creatures without making it a mess.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, I think, you know, I might just be speaking from my point of view, but often when I'm going through a monster manual, the flavor text is nice, but I already have an idea in my head of what role these monsters are going to fulfill. So I just pull them out and I throw them in, you know. And sometimes I miss things because I do that, and then later on I go back and read the flavor text. I was like, oh wow, those guys could have been more interesting, or they could be less interesting. So I don't think, you know, from the gaming point of view, really our players just need these stats, but you know, we need to present them in a fun way.
Well, I do think that on the gaming side of it, though, there's when you were talking earlier about, you know, giving them optional strengths and weaknesses, I do think that there's a tendency for DMs to plop down a creature with the standard stats, and what happens over time is players come along and say, you know, oh yeah, this is such and such creature, let's do, you know, they know exactly what to do, right? Because they know its weaknesses, they know its strengths. And I think from the stats perspective, we're adding a little bit of flexibility so that there can be some surprise, but also in the flavor text, it's presenting some different ways for them to be written into the story. So yeah, I 100% agree. But I also think that it's good even just from the gaming perspective.
So I think the first thing that we have to figure out, because like I said, most of the stats are done. There's more coming in from Aiden. So we really need to develop these characters and why. Like, for example, I wrote down, like, why are they friends? Because they seem like they wouldn't be friends. But often people can share a common interest, and it can, like, sort of,
real quick, I had sorry, let me okay, so I made a note that just my thinking on it, and we still have to think more deeply on this, but as a starting point, since my character respects these creatures, I want to study them so that we as a people can learn from them. And, maybe I have some hope of coexisting or something like that. Some of those details we can figure out. But the point is, I want to study them because I respect them. You most likely want to study them to defend against them. So we're on the same. We have a parallel. Assuming I'm right about that, but it sounds like from what you said that would be true, at least to some degree. So it gives us both a common interest, but also a point where we might argue on some of them, where I'd be a little more sympathetic to the creature, and you would say, well, that doesn't even matter because people are going to die if we don't learn to defend ourselves.
I think another something that's going to be really hard for us to tell a story. I mean, I don't think we have to tell a story. But like seeing that the creatures are all going to be listed according to alphabetical order, you wouldn't tell a story through the alphabet.
Right.
It's going to have to jump around. So I think like base character beliefs, and then if we come up with some like big events that they shared, like I mean, obviously, if Atan now owns a bar, maybe your character just, but due to his interest in monsters, he went to this monster hunter's bar, and maybe also has a taste for like a certain, booze that Atan has, and they bonded over that or something, we can figure, or maybe it was longer than that. I think I had sort of a idea, and I don't know where I jotted it down, where Atan was a like a guard, caravan guard, traveling merchant type person, until creatures sort of destroyed his livelihood, and that's when he just decided like that they have to be out.
That's perfect. That's perfect. See, it's funny because obviously, or even from what I was just reading from my notes, I tried to make it flexible because I didn't know where you were going to go with yours, but I made a couple of assumptions, or at least I was hoping, and that's perfect. One thing I was just thinking though, what if? So I mentioned the backstory that my character had this experience as a child. That's his earliest memory. So yeah, what if my character has been locked in libraries for years trying to learn about them. And then at a certain age, I decide, you know what? I'm never going to learn anything from books. I need to go out and hunt this creature that took me as a child and prove to the world that it's not what they think it is. And when I get out there, I'm naive, and you have to save me. But then that's what brings us together to where we're both we realize that we are both same objective creatures.
Yeah. What if your character, and what's your character's name again?
Um, Delgon, but that was just a couple syllables that popped in my head as you were saying your name, and I realized, oh crap, a name.
Well, I'll just write that down for now. Um, so it could fit in fictionally, if the library in Kowal is huge, and there's the Society of Librarians that are actually secret spellcasters. So what if like Delgon is like a very inexperienced like Luminar, and I mean maybe you don't want this because then it's also cool having someone with no powers. But then he could really bring something because he could bring like a little bit of healing or a little bit of buffing to Atan in the hunting. Someone like Atan would change from seeing him as just a bookworm that's coming along, getting in the way and arguing with them, to basically a benefit to bring along, and then it could expand out from there. Like you could see, at first he's like, oh, this guy is worthless. Oh, wait, this guy is useful as a tool. And then, you spend enough time like out camping with someone and traveling the woods, you either hate them or you love them. So,
Yeah, and I am imagining they have to have rapport. They have to like each other. I don't think it works otherwise. So yeah, I like that. The key part to my idea wasn't the powerlessness so much as the naivety. That I think I can just go out into the forest and find this creature and prove to the world that, and then I find myself in trouble. It's that part that I like I like that aspect to the character.
yeah, I'm also seeing a little bit of in my head of Atan having like a little bit of like the Dean Winchester sort of feel, like sort of stubborn, but yet, like sort of soft at heart underneath it all. Um, I don't know. Can I legally say that he has some Dean Winchester in him? Is the CW going to come after me now? Or maybe they'll just steal our monster manual, become like season 18 of Supernatural. I was talking with Laura about that last night. So we were talking about monster hunting, and of course, Supernatural came up. And I was like, she's like, what season are they on? I was like, I don't know, like season 14. I was like, I really have no problem just knowing that for the rest of my life, Supernatural is a show to go back to and watch, like, about that show, All right, I'm low on beer. I'm going to go grab a beer, but I'm still on camera, so you can keep talking.
Yeah, just keep talking. Go.
What's that?
You said keep talking. Just go.
Okay, I'll lie. I can't hear you. I can't hear you at all. But I got a beer, so now I'm back.
I was just giving you a hard time. You're like, keep talking. Go. Like, by the way, is it too ridiculous if I say that I have a phobia of horses for one? So like, as much as I want to empathize with all these other creatures that would be considered monsters, when it comes to horses, I'm just terrified of them and I want to put them in the book. But you're like, no, they don't qualify. It's a horse. I don't know where we put that out.
I don't hate horses, but horses have never played a big part in any of my like D&D campaigns, like ever, which is so silly because like, I mean, during this time period, of course you'd have a freaking horse. I mean, even when I played Skyrim, I hated being on the horse.
Really?
I'm like, no, I just want to run from place to place, Yeah, I watched Conan the Barbarian too much, and I just always pictured myself as Arnold just running across the landscape.
Yeah, but you know that Conan could he was one of the few people who could shoot accurately from horseback.
Conan could. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I don't know if that was, you know what though, I don't remember if that was in any of the original books. It was in one of the Robert Jordan books that he was teaching a bunch of soldiers how to shoot from horseback. By the way, side note, but kind of a central one, is I wanted to make sure that we get a mixture, that when we're, I know we already have, and just in terms of sheer numbers, we have about as many creatures as we need to do a book already. But we need to make sure there's representation for the different environments. So now maybe there could be expansions for like sea creatures later, but at the very least, make sure there's air creatures and land creatures. And as far as land creatures go, we need to make sure there's forest, the wastes, the desert, and so forth. So when people travel, they don't get to a place where there's no crap, nothing lives here. It's been written.
Right.
I'd love to do some sea creatures too. Because I like sea creatures in general, but I mentioned that partly because I know that hasn't been a common thing in your campaigns, going out to sea, but others may want to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we don't have anything we have some water-based stuff, but not like real water things. Like so a lot of these creatures now, a quick review for anyone that's watching that doesn't know much about the Dark Return world of Euteria, is that a lot of these creatures were supposedly brought to this world by the gods to fight in the God Wars. And they were pulled from multiple universes, but especially this one universe, which we call the Navirum, which that universe got very close to the universe of Euteria. And so some of these creatures are now starting to come over, like making the leap from that world over. Some, their spirits coming over. Some of them got trapped in this in-between sort of limbo place, and they're popping back out. So there's some that are just like creatures, like, and I, sometimes I don't know where I get these names. I think that this was like a Slavic demon-like creature, but it's called a Beelzebub, and it's like a giant frog creature. So it's like, I don't see these things like really coming over from, to be put into battle, but I see in the Navirum, in this strange dreamlike universe, that like frogs could get so big that they could swallow whole creatures. And so it doesn't mean that every creature coming over has the mindset of like, we're just going to kill everything in Euteria. But that, sometimes if you have a 8-foot large frog, it's just going to swallow a person. So I think I was going through all that because I think it'd be really interesting of like our own oceans, because I relate Euteria to our world a lot. Our own oceans are filled with monstrously creepy creatures. So if you jump over to the Navirum, whose physics of that universe are more dreamlike, what would the creatures be like that like lived in the ocean there? Like how weird would they be?
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that that's interesting. And we'll have to go through and see what creatures, because I'm slowly making my way through the work in progress, and who knows, like a lot of these creatures I've had for a while, so there might be some sea creatures, but there's always space for a couple more. And maybe even like flip through the D20 monster manual and see what they've got that are sea-based creatures. And see if there's something we can base things off of, or just jump right into Lovecraft.
Yeah, I'm a fan of those types of creatures. The Lovecraftian.
Sorry, I just had a beer issue. My beer started shooting out at me. Sorry, I didn't mean to kill the conversation with my beer. All right, so we've got our characters.
I do think we should make an effort to at least get a few in there. If we already have them, great. But if not, let's try to think of a few. I assume we have subterranean creatures, and I imagine the different environments on land are mostly covered at least. What about air creatures, flying creatures?
Yeah, we've got some flying creatures. We've got some like ghost-like creatures.
Yeah, things that live in the trees.
Yep, we got that.
Okay, so it sounds like we probably just might want to think of a couple of aquatic creatures and aquatic / amphibious, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any like readily seafaring creatures there. So I think our next step is we need to do stats for our writers for Atan and Delgon. You can either do it like if you just want to do it by hand and like download the character sheet from SagaBorn.com. I'm assuming if Atan is 45 years old and he's been hunting monsters for like half his life, I'm gonna probably say he's like level 6. You know, so not like the highest level, but like he's made it pretty far.
Mm-hmm. Hang on, let me back up a little bit. What why what are we going to do with the author's stats?
Well, one, people are going to want to know that. Two, like, I mean, just people love like the gaming crunch side.
Are we going to include these character stats in the book?
So we could, but I think it'd be better. I think we put it up on darkreturn.com so people could check them out and see sort of what we're working with. You know, for these characters, like, oh yeah, it makes sense that, like, Atan would have a 16 in charisma. I'm just making that up right now. Because he owns this bar and he's telling stories and it comes through and how he presents the monsters.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'll do that. I'll grab a character sheet and write something up.
Or you can also download PC Gen, which has SagaBorn in it, and you could just make your character up in there. The best thing to do though would be to keep them separate level by level, so that way, depending on what fiction we're writing, like if we're writing fiction that was like 15 years earlier, then we know that they were only level 3, and they would have these abilities. I'm not looking to go deep into that. Like I don't want to say, well, Atan was only level 4, he couldn't have fought this creature during this time. But it'd just be good to have their stats as they build up instead of like, this is their 6th level stats and that's it,
Right. Well, let's say I'm a level 6 Luminar. I'll start there and we can work backwards as necessary.
All right. So yeah, because actually one of the things that Aiden and I talked about was I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we wrote this book that's like, the Creature Compendium, the Guide to Hunting Monsters, and then it was an actual in-game item that you could get that gave you knowledge bonuses versus monsters in the book. So like if a character's fighting something, he would do a knowledge check if he owns this book. And then Aiden brought up, he's like, man, you could have a whole set of adventures that are just an adventure path of working for Atan and Delgon, going out and finding more monster stats.
Right.
And then you're doing that to earn their favor and like earn monster hunting items. So obviously if we did an adventure path with these guys in it that was a monster hunting adventure path, then we need their stats for that too.
That adds a whole new dimension to this whole thing. I like that.
And And then also I'd mentioned it before, and I don't know if I'd mentioned it to you, but that that Atan ran sort of a bar out of his basement that he called Monster Bar, which became known as M Bar,
Right.
for short, which is of course where I'm broadcasting from now, and also where we do Drinking Dungeon and so on. But I want to make that part of the fictional world as well. So it's sort of like a Monster Hunter's Bar. So that way it would be in the fiction that even before we do an adventure path that can be out there, where people who are adventuring in our world, you know, could drop by the Monster Bar and like they could like ask these guys questions about monsters, or you know, get
where's it located?
It's in the city of Koala, which is where like the current adventure path is located. I don't know if I have it up on darkreturn.com yet.
Well, that works anyway, because that's where the library that I would be spending my time in is.
Right. The website now. If you search for MBAR, it pulls up Melyntis. That's not right. There we go. Yep, MBAR is already up on Dark Return if you search for M space bar. It's a hidden pub in the northeast part of Kowal. And so we can just keep building off of that. You know, I'll make a map of it and so on. I'm actually, this week I've been working on, besides these characters, I actually got the first adventure, the first rough draft completely finished on the first adventure for SagaBorn officially. And I'm going to be reading it through, and then maybe I might ask you to run through and edit it. It's only 20 pages, so it's not like a massive endeavor. But that takes place in Kowal too, which I think most of our stuff from this point, that's going to be the focal point. But I think just like when we did the elf book, we're going to need to do like a map of where our characters have traveled and at what times, you know, like, so that way if they're discussing things that's, you know, we can know, okay, well, they ran into this during this leg of their journey and so on.
Sure.
So I think that's maybe, so the first thing is writing stats. The second thing will be their journey. And I think that will mainly be me, seeing that I'm, you know, much more sort of familiar with the world that's not written out. So I'll write the rough draft of that, and then you can come in and add to that or take away whatever you want.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then I think the third thing for me is just going to be going through and getting these creatures moved out of the work in progress folder over to the main creature compendium folder. So the thing about that is that does not stop you. I mean, I don't know if you want to jump in to this yet. Maybe you can look at it, and then the next time we have a discussion, we can talk about it. Like, I am comfortable with you jumping in right now, either in the creature compendium or the work in progress page, and starting to add fiction. Because we can always go back and edit it, because right now, every monster is individual. Once every monster is finished, then we can, we'll put it into a big text and then do one big edit through that as well. But I have no problem with you going in and like looking through this stuff and going, you know, oh, hey, like, here's the Earth Wraith, which has like no flavor text at all. And then writing some flavor text on it, you know. Some of it you might have to get familiar with, you know, the stats, because I know it's, you know, you play very infrequently. But you can easily just send me a text and ask me what certain things mean. I mean, you know, you get dex, con, what abilities are, skills are pretty, you know, self-explained. And also, if you have any questions, you know, you just got your hardback book, so you can look it up.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
All right, and Seth, I think, has covered a lot of the stuff that we want to talk about in this one. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we called it a day?
Well, once again, I understand we have but just as I was thinking of to think, because it was really while I was trying to think of a character, I started thinking what would frighten me, and I was thinking what would frighten me, and then the answer is always, I always think of this when when it comes to an effective monster that's actually scary is the ones that present some sort of an existential terror. The ones that make you question, or maybe, like lycanthropes are always scary. I'm not afraid of them because they've been so overdone in media, but that idea that I might be the monster. So, and then there was I'm not going to get into it. There was a torture method that I was thinking of. So I had these two ideas. I'm just going to throw them out. Maybe even if it doesn't go in this book, I just want to get them out in the wild here. One is a creature that's filled with parasites, and these parasites and this creature have a symbiotic relationship with each other. The parasites keep it alive, but the parasites have to be fed. So what it does is it opens up and enfolds its victim. I guess you could say like a Venus flytrap. The victim becomes itchy because the parasites start to attach all over the skin. Over time, it starts to become painful as they start to eat away at the flesh. And for days, they're being consumed before they die. And then that got me thinking about parasites. So I came up with another parasite creature, and I'm sure this sort of thing has been done, and in fact, maybe we even have something like this, but I don't know of anything, so I'm still going to throw it out. And it's a parasite that infects a person. This is just a parasite. It infects a person. Starts out like a neurological disorder. They lose control of their limbs. It just seems like they're sick. Something is wrong. But then their limbs start doing things they don't want them to do, until next thing you know, the parasite's taken over their body. But the key thing here is the mind. They don't affect the brain in any way. They don't affect the mind. The person is perfectly lucid and aware, but watching as their body starts to kill the people around them. So they're trapped in there watching themselves do horrific things. I don't know how you put stats on things like that, but
well, I mean, we've actually got
just some ideas I was throwing around.
One demon that actually does that possesses the body of the living or dead, and you can see what's happening, but if you missed your savings throw on it coming in, then that's it.
And we have this, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. On things like this, you have to, well, I mean, actually on this, it's a DC 13 will save to stop from getting possessed. So you could actually have a Bahul possess one of the adventuring party if they roll really badly. And then all of a sudden you're stuck with the question, like, do you kill your adventuring buddy, or do you try to get them out?
Right.
Now they have one of the things where I said, so Bahul weaknesses are salt, silver, and enchanted weapons. So I'm going with the old ghost Fae thing, that if you circle them in salt, then they can't get out. And they can leave the body, but they can't leave the ring of salt. And then silver is the only way to kill them, whether they're in. So you can kill the body that it's in, but if you don't kill it with a silver weapon, then it can escape. And then if the Bahul's vessel is killed while it is possessed, it comes back as a zombie. So actually, some of my players ran into a group of these guys. They were possessing city guard bodies, and they thought they're just fighting city guards, and then but that the city guards were for some reason just coming at them like with lethal force. So they took down the guards, and then when the guards fell down, they're like, okay, like, you know, don't, like, they're out, they're incapacitated, don't kill them. And then they get up, like, then, like, you know, the spirit, the Bahul comes out of it in incorporeal form, takes off, the bodies rise up as zombies, they have to start fighting the zombies, and then more people start running out of nearby houses, attacking them because the Bahul has possessed them. And then when it's all said and done, like, they're stuck with bodies that they had to kill twice over, and they're covered in blood. And so then it left this really weird role-playing thing. Like, you know, they were freaked out, like they killed guards, and they'd actually never heard of a Bahul before, so they didn't even know what to do. But they figured out, they're like, well, I'm sure like enchanted weapons will take these guys down, and so they used their magic weapons or their legacy weapons to kill them. But that being said, it led to this really interesting thing where the fear was not so much the creatures, but the position that these monsters put them in. You know, like, because then they're like, oh shit, we just killed guards, and we killed, like, you know, this woman that ran at us with a freaking, you know, a baker's pin. Like, what the hell do we do? You know?
Right. Those are the kinds of things I enjoy probably more than just who can outroll the other in a sword battle, you know, with where a creature has some special aggressive powers, but you know, it's those things that create these dilemmas and things like that. By the way, let me back up, because I am going to go ahead. Let me tell you what my thought process on the other thing was. Years ago, I did torture research for something I was writing, and I was trying to find just what is the worst form in my mind. What scares me the worst, and the one that just sounds terrible. And a lot of these torture forms are, you know, they're apocryphal accounts. We don't know if they actually did a lot of these things or not. But this one, I do believe I read, they know that this was done. And what they would do is take the person, strip them naked, and put honey on the butthole and, I don't know, like the nipples, the sensitive spots. And then they would put them inside of they'd hollow out a log, put them inside the hollowed out log, cut armholes in it, and then throw them out face up in a still pond filled with bugs that are attracted to the honey. And over days, these bugs eat the honey and the flesh. And so I basically came up with an idea that's that in monster form. The idea that it engulfs the person and then feeds on them. Now it's not it doesn't scare me as much thinking of it as a monster for some reason. There's just something about thinking about floating in a log in a still pond with, you know, all these bugs and stuff. That's just horrifying to me. I don't know quite how to replicate it, but I do like the idea of the monster that has the parasites that feed on them. There's an extra, you know, it could just be the monster feeds on them slowly, and I'm sure there are plenty of monsters out there that do that. It's what there's a bit of flavor that's added when it's little bugs doing the eating. You know, when you're covered in insects that are doing the work.
Well, I think some of the horror too is that it's people doing it to people, you know.
That's true. That is true. But anyway, all right.
All right. So,
all of my notes.
All right. Well, we got our assignments. And then, you know, even if you don't want to write anything, like, click through the Creature Compendium Google Doc and just, like, read things and get a feel for, like, what's in there, you know,
right.
like,
well,
what we've got.
I've read the creatures in some of the other books, so I already am familiar with some of them. But yeah, I'll go through it, and I'll probably go ahead and start writing some stuff. It just depends on if I need more information or not, and if I do, I'll either text you or comment on the doc.
All right. Well, think it was a good first discussion. And all right, I guess we'll sign off for the night.
All
Thanks
right.
to everyone that watched.
All right. See you later.